Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Eric Meter Show. Today, I have the honor of interviewing Robert Scott Bell. I've personally known Robert for multiple years. Robert's the father of two. He's a husband, a broadcaster, a keynote speaker, an author, and also a homeopathic practitioner. I know you'll really love this episode. Thank you. Privacy Academy with Eric Meter. All right. So, yeah, we saw each other about a month ago at the Red Pill Expo. And one of the things I really love about the Red Pill Expo is there's so many different areas of freedom. And they all, at the Red Pill Expo, have a solution-oriented premise around it. It's not just sitting around talking. It's about, okay, this is an issue. How do we solve it for the sake of individual freedom? And health is a really interesting one because health is probably the pinnacle of individual freedom because it's your body. You know, this is what it means to have ownership in life. So what is it that got you into health in the first place, I guess?
Well, not having it. That's one of those things like, yeah, I'd like that. Could I have some of that, please? Not being healthy from the time I was born back in the 1960s when there were like 3 or 4 maybe vaccines back then. So it wasn't as bad as your generation getting hammered if your parents didn't know better. And the assault was more or less from industrial pollution in a general sense. The food was starting to be contaminated post-World War II in America, where it went into chemical agriculture and monocropping. That's when they started utilizing also pesticides, herbicides, and fungicides, the era of DDT, et cetera. And so all of those things impacted me at birth, really. I was one of the canaries in the coal mine of my generation, Gen X. And so I was actually chronically ill from the time I was born. Now, I could still function and do things, but I had, inflammatory issues, bowel issues. I had skin conditions, skin rashes. I had chronic and recurrent ear infections and sinus infections, always met with various antibiotic drugs, nonsteroidal and steroidal drugs as well. I eventually, with all the allergy medicines I had to take, eventually switched over to something called allergy shots. I had about 10 years of allergy shots, none of which actually cured my allergies. And by the time I was about 18, 19 at university, I was on a track to become a doctor because I always wanted to become a doctor or a healer. Let me just say it that way. But the only model I had for doctoring in America was the allopathic pharmaceutical variety. And there was a point when I realized, these experts, even at the university where I went to, acknowledged that, as I asked them pointed questions about my own health journey, why am I sick? Why have I always been sick? Why was I diagnosed with musculoskeletal inflammation at the age of 11? Tendinitis as an 11-year-old. And these are sincere questions. Doc, you're the expert. Tell me. They admitted sheepishly that they didn't even know why I was sick, why I had my allergies. And then, my next question is like, will I ever be well? I mean, you don't even know why I'm sick. And the best they could, say is maybe one day you'll grow out of it. And at that point, I realized if I was to become a doctor like them and do the things that they did to me, to other people, I would be miserable. I would be like, this is not why I signed on. This is, my uncle, who was a physician, a medical doctor who I looked up to, loved very dearly. He warned me as a teenager. He said, I don't think you really want to be a doctor. I was like, Uncle Bob, that's all I ever want to do. You're a doctor. That's what I want to do. He says, no, you'll be miserable. But he looked at it from the standpoint of government interference in medicine, how bureaucracy and red tape was ruining the ability of a doctor to help, an individual meet their needs. But I didn't fully understand the depth of it till it happened, to me. And then at that point, I kind of gave up on being a doctor and said, good Lord, I don't know what I'm supposed to do now, because that's all I ever thought about doing. And it was 4 or 5 years later where prayers were answered after diving deep into actually spiritual studies to ground myself in how the world really works. I was always interested in that. What's behind the scenes here? What's really happening? That I met a homeopathic doctor who immigrated to America from Belgium. I ended up studying with him for 10 years and became a homeopath. Now, he was the first doctor who actually ever gave me a remedy that helped me without hurting me and told me what I can do to change my life, my health, and get it back by eating clean foods called organic foods. I didn't know that because all foods were from the grocer's freezer or the fast food drive-through for me growing up as an American, not so much culinary delightfulness. It was just fast and cheap, So all of those things led to chronic illness, paper over chronic illness, hit with that drug, give it that drug, give it that. I had an adverse event, by the way, to the smallpox vaccine. Don't ever let them do that to you if they try to bring it back. That was nasty. So anyway, that's the long story short of when you don't have something, you might decide, I really want that. And then the question becomes, Eric, and I ask this of everybody about what they say they desire. I say, how badly do you really want what you claim to want? Is it as bad as if somebody was holding your head underwater and you were fighting for air? Is it that bad? If it's not that bad, something's going to come along and distract you from your goal because you didn't really want it as bad as you thought you wanted it. So I wanted health that bad that I put up with 10 years of intense training and study from a guy who was not the nicest man in the world. He had his own issues, but I was like, it's too important. It's too worth it. I'm going to put up with it for what the end stage or end goal is for me to learn how to heal myself and then help others like I intended to when I got here.
That's awesome. That's a great story. And, I also, I'm not very well versed in health. I like looking into it. I've had a lot of health people on this show. And I definitely think one of the bigger problems right now is that people aren't in the mainstream, aren't looking at it through this holistic lens that we are spiritual, we are physical. Everything is just so acute, and they're so quick to write pharmaceutical prescriptions, But one of the areas I'd like to talk about is how does your health affect your mental side of you as well? Because, it's very easy to see, maybe I fall down the stairs and I've got a broken leg, or I ingest something and I have inflammation. But I think another way that what you consume physically interacts with you that maybe people don't talk about as much is how it affects you on a mental level. So is that something you'd like to talk about?
Yeah, one of the interesting quotes from Robert F. Kennedy Jr. as he had been on the circuit learning about health and healing and the danger of vaccines, perhaps what's in them, etc. He would say that a healthy man has an unlimited number of dreams, right, to fulfill, and the thoughts and the mental state to go, oh, I can conquer, I can do this. A sick man has only one thought, dream. I want to be well. So the impact on the mental state is such, if it's an acute injury like you described, you break your leg, you kind of have a parameter of looking at time in a way of in 6 or 8 weeks, I'll be back on this leg. So it doesn't necessarily impact you mentally in sense of a long term. If you're in a mysterious state of illness like I was, chronicities over chronicities, you're like, all I was thinking about was how do I get well? Now, there was a bit of a detour because I was still a young man when I started, that petitions and prayers to God to heal me or help me find a way to heal. But a lot of my focus was just everything I was doing was to figure that out. And if I could figure that out, then I could get to the next thing, right? Which is then, what is your mission? What is your journey? What is your, if you really desire freedom? And I find this for our freedom, if I can say a community of freedom-loving people on the planet, that there is a blind spot, or has been over the years I've been doing this, where they're all into freedom except when it comes to doctors and medicine. And then suddenly like, well, no, I got to turn my body over to them. They're the expert class. You got to recognize that their training has been altered and corrupted by an industry that only profits when you are sick, by managing diseases that I argue that they create, because there is no such thing as a drug deficiency disease. It doesn't exist. Yet every ailment, illness, symptom, emotion is perceived by the allopathic medical community as a deficiency of some FDA patented approved conglomerate of chemicals that are by definition toxic to varying degrees, forcing something to happen or stopping something from happening, with all these untoward effects that they relegate to side effects, which if we really define it, I think more appropriately, side effects are direct effects of the drug that are not currently marketable. Follow me there? It's like, we don't have a marketable use for this. We'll call it a side effect until it becomes the direct effect. Oh, we can market it for that? Well, it's that side effect's now a direct effect. And the direct effect we said we like is now the side effect of that. You see how, and then but people have kind of given up on bodily autonomy and, let's say, self-rule when it comes to their bodies because they feel it's too much. I'm not an expert in that. Like, if you're not an expert in your own body, who will be? Somebody that went to medical school to learn how to poison you for profit, to poison you back to health, which is an absurdist notion. This is not to say there's never a place for an allopathic pharmaceutical intervention in a life or death thing, but allopathic medicine is born out of warfare. The advances in medicine, in triaging, in keeping people alive is not born out of managing chronic diseases. It's about people riddled with bullets. How do we get the bullets out of them and stop the bleeding so they don't die? Or somebody gets hit by a car or a bus. How do we set their bones, get them back? These are things. And they've also said, well, it's infection, right? Acute infection. But I've raised my kids, who you know, they're your age, both my son and my daughter. They've never had a vaccine. They've never had one antibiotic. And they're young adults your age. How is that possible? Have they had infections? Sure, they're human beings. But I haven't had to resort to those extreme measures that I think in terms of chemo, right? When I talk about antibiotics, people think, well, antibiotics, just an antibiotic. I'm like, I want you to hear the word chemo. The next time your doctor says, well, let me prescribe for you this antibiotic. I was like, hear the word chemo and go, whoa, doc, it's just an infection. Chemo? Isn't that a little bit too much? Now, knowing what I know, utilizing the noble metals, like silver, gold, and copper. Silver particularly is profoundly antibacterial, but it's not an antibiotic. It's not anti-life. It doesn't destroy your healthy cells or, imbalance your gut in the same way an antibiotic does. So we have tools, including as a homeopath, I have hundreds and hundreds of remedies to select from to help. And that's what I've been able to use to raise my kids so that they didn't have to resort to those drugs. But when we don't know, when we've given up on it, said, well, we'll leave it to the expert class, the doctors, even if he or she means well, as a doctor you hire, they're limited often by the scope of their training. And they're trained to what? Drug everything that presents as a symptom. So that's where we are relegated to impairing our journey to do that which we mentally, maybe even spiritually, want to achieve. And if the cause is freedom, it's as worthy a goal as anything that we could ever strive for, I believe. Because beyond life itself, I believe the secondary, right next to life as a gift from God, is agency, is choice, is that freedom to make choices, even the freedom to screw up. But when you are sick, chronically ill, or even when you're temporarily off your leg because you're on crutches, you're limited in how you can exert your efforts to regain or defend freedom. So I'd say a long answer to a very pointed question that you asked me. Hopefully this makes sense.
Absolutely. No, I think that's fantastic. And one of the points that you mentioned there is very true, is people feel overwhelmed. They feel like they just need to outsource everything to their doctors, or else, who knows what they're going to do. And I think a lot of people do realize, hey, the food I'm eating is poison. Maybe I shouldn't be taking these pills, whatever it is, but they just don't know where to start. And I can relate with that too, especially in the past. I'm putting more effort into it now. I'm trying to learn as much as I can, but for someone beginning their journey in that, what would you say are some of the most important first steps in terms of, health freedom?
Oh, man. The health freedom issue becomes one of not being first enslaved to experts, right? It doesn't mean you can't, let's say, contract with someone. That's the kind of idea of a license, but a private license, right? License is a permission slip to do that which would otherwise be considered illegal. We have this concept that if a doctor is licensed, that they're somehow legitimate. Yet they're the third leading cause of death. I'm like, how's that license working on protecting the public, right? But there's a concept of license and permission in that when I engage with somebody in a contractual relationship, this is in freedom. Two people of sound body and mind, of adult, of the age of majority, entering into a contract agreement. It's like, you're a doctor of some kind. Maybe you're a homeopath, maybe you're a naturopath, maybe you're an herbalist, maybe you're an allopath. But I, as someone who maybe I have an ailment, an illness that I just can't really figure out, and I'm looking to you for help. I can engage in a private relationship. The doctor-patient was considered a sacred relationship, where the guide in that relationship was divine spirit or God. That was why it was called sacred. And that's where we must get back to the honoring of any relationship in a contract. You got, an offer, an acceptance, right? And then a performance based on that. But when third-party interveners come in, whether it be insurance, private, or government, they dictate the rules of the engagement. And then suddenly now you thought your doctor is going to respond to your needs. Your doctor has to check with the third party to say, can I get permission to do what this no, I can't. Sorry. You don't know that as the person engaging in that. So finding a doctor, which the true origin of the word doctor is teacher, physician, healer, not someone who says, I'm gonna check with this third party, tell me what to do, and then I'll give you the drug. You can go fill it and poison yourself with it, right? There's no responsibility there with a third party. It's kind of like the old stories of the vampire, right? or Count Dracula, right? What was one of the things about the interesting thing about how you could stay protected from the vampire? The vampire couldn't come into your home unless you invited him in. Isn't that interesting? But he's powerful, mean, evil force. Why can't he just come in? Well, there's something deeply, I would say, spiritual and connected to this freedom thing, that even Dracula or the vampire could not violate the right of property. You had to invite him in. And so many times we look at these illnesses and we say it was caused by, and we look at external sources, but it was we who ingested the poison, who drank the toxic thing or took the drug. It was our behavior that opened the door to come in. And so we like to blame, we're the victim of a vampire. Now, the vampires do what vampires do, but apparently they need permission. You've got to welcome them in. So that's another higher level recognition of how do I achieve health freedom? First, I got to find somebody who knows something that I think I need that I don't know, which is true in life, right? I can't be an expert in everything. I know a lot, but there's certain areas where I'm going to, if I can do some basic mechanical work, like change the oil, but if I'm working on some of these electronic things in cars today, man, it's beyond me, and I don't have the technology. So I'll go to a mechanic. That's a private, kind of thing. He's not necessarily checking with an insurance company, even though when you talk about insurance in a car wreck, it's interesting how you now have to fight to get your car fixed the right way, as the insurance companies are trying to say, I'm going to pay the minimum. The guy trying to fix it is going, that's not enough. You know how it is. All these it's like, where is that ability to go, you know what? I need this fixed. Here's what I'm going to do for you. You do for me. So finding someone who knows that, who's conscious of that, is interesting. And that's a hard thing to do because we've lost sight of that. And then finding out, what is it, maybe the first thing that they ask of you or that you could ask of them, right? When we talk about, I want to regain my health. Well, I'm going to observe them. I'm going to look at them. Are they morbidly obese? Do they look like they have, a myriad of ailments and illnesses? And like, why would I necessarily go to someone who's not well to help me to get well when they're living a debauched lifestyle for that? I mean, it's obvious, it seems like, but it can be a little superficial. And then, my next question, Doc, if you're a doctor someday, how often do you have a bowel movement? I'm asking them that. Man, because if they're going fewer times a day than you or fewer times a week than you, they're full of what? It's not going to be a good thing for you. The outcome won't be good. And if they're offended by the question, you'll also know they're not actually going to help you to heal, as opposed to them going, wow, I'm glad you asked that question, because now they know you are on that path. The other thing is, if that doctor doesn't ask you, I know this is a hard ask, but if that doctor doesn't ask you, what are you doing to help your liver every day? Something good. Tell me something. One thing you do every day to help your liver. If that doctor's not aware of how important that is, they're not qualified to help you. If you've been, for me, like chronically ill due to toxicity and deficiency, etc. So again, I'm trying to give some practical thought forms that you begin to go, I've never heard anybody ask me that question ever. I haven't even thought of asking that question. It's because everything we do is designed to what? Poison our bodies, poison our liver, make us sick and dependent upon a particular class of doctors that are trained only by one industry that they've been captured by. This goes back to the 1910 Flexner Report in America, where they corrupted the medical school curriculum and made it only legit. The accredited universities for medicine would be legitimized only if they taught the curricula Big Pharma wanted them to teach for patent petrochemical medicines that can be sold for high profits and guarantee nobody gets well, but they're managed in perpetuity until they one day die of a chronic disease that was brought about by the very treatments that they went to the doctors for because they were licensed and approved by government. So stop looking at government licensure and government approval as a stamp of legitimacy. I would say, you want health freedom? Start moving away from that and into those that have a track record of actually helping people to heal by empowering them, by teaching them what to do rather than doing it for them.
Absolutely. Yeah,
that sucked, didn't it? That wasn't what you wanted to hear.
No, that's fantastic. What I have pinned on my Twitter, like the pinned tweet, is the most effective poison is one consumed willingly. And so we as people are I totally agree with that. I mean, so what I'm saying with that is not just the physical. I mean, if you look at what you consume mentally or emotionally through media, there's just poison all around us. And I think the goal is to kind of get in tune with purity. You want to purify yourself as much as possible.
The poison is in the program.
Yep.
Who's running the program? Who's programming you? How did you end up believing what you believed? How did I believe that doctors knew about healing? I was programmed to believe that. And the program only broke when I realized what they were doing to me was breaking me, was not helping me. And their tacit admissions, sheepish admissions that they didn't know what they were doing when it comes to what I was desiring. I wasn't wanting just to manage my symptoms. I had been doing that my whole life with drugs and shots. I even had surgery to open up the holes in my nose. They said, you have a deviated septum. Let's make those holes bigger, like I'm a bowling ball. And all it did was create bigger holes for more snot from all my allergies. It didn't get rid of my allergies. That was an immune, modulation issue and a corruption due to liver congestion and gastrointestinal inflammation, leaky gut, which was caused by what? All the pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, additives, you name it. Now glyphosate is in everything, robbing us of essential minerals like another noble mineral like copper, which, at the Red Pill Expo, I really leaned into that because I think people need to hear how copper deficiency manifests as a myriad of syndromes, diseases, ailments that are not actually diseases. They're deficiencies of this one mineral, copper, including the runaway inflammation and immune response that is so vicious that you could die of it without copper. Copper cools that appropriately. So these are the things that were programs that were running in me, being raised pharmaceutically, allopathically in America from the 1960s forward.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah, that's very interesting. And what about silver or gold? I mean, you mentioned the noble metals. I mean, you talked about copper there, but I've heard a little bit about silver. I don't know if I've ever heard about gold and if it has healing properties.
Yeah, well, gold is that the shiny metal, right? The thing that we all desire. Gold is like, it's got, gold. But gold has profound properties within the human and animal physiology and a need for it. Now, not a lot of things have a lot of gold in them. That's why it's a rare mineral and considered a commodity and used as money. But as a medicinal and supplemental part of our diet, gold facilitates profound mental acuity capacity, right? IQ, elevating IQ with gold. Also, the connection to the spiritual realms has always been, gold has been just valued for not just its beauty, but that there's an element of spiritual connectedness when we talk about the third eye. If you ever go into that, the tisratil, much less the pineal gland, there's a connectedness there. Gold, the halo, the concept of the halo, for those that are Christian and they see the halo around Jesus, it's golden light, right? Always. Now, the gold also plays a role in reproductive function. If we have the capacity for reproducing, that is, bringing new life onto the planet, new souls inhabiting new bodies, gold plays a powerful role in making it possible. And there's such a great increase in infertility among young people, greatly accelerated post-COVID or COVID injections, that we really need to bring gold back in the system to correct the infertility issues that are happening as well. Also, it is known to be a profound anti-cancer agent, gold in a nanoparticulate state, and also for countering what's called autoimmune inflammation, run amok, the immune system gone awry. So all of the metals, silver, copper, gold, have some crossover properties. Gold leans in a little bit more into those capacities for intelligence and connectivity in spiritual sense, as well as reproductive properties, as well as, again, anti-cancer. So I go through it really quickly, but getting it is not easy. The highest content of gold in any food that I've seen is bee pollen from Alaska, interestingly enough. We're a lot of gold, but bee pollen from Alaska as a food. Otherwise, you look at over my shoulder, you've got the sovereign silver, the sovereign copper, and in next year, they'll have the sovereign gold as a bioactive hydrosol, silver, gold, and copper hydrosol. So we can take it in as a liquid in a safe bioactive way. We're not going to take too much.
Very interesting. Yeah, that's awesome. That's really cool. Yeah, because then my follow-up question was going to be, how do we consume it? Because it's, I've only heard of it as the, store of value, but that's super interesting. So let me pivot here to people who maybe feel regret about maybe they've been vaccinated in the past. Maybe they're currently on pharmaceuticals and they want to get off. What would you recommend to someone who's kind of regretting, want to detox, that sort of thing?
Well, homeopathic medicine is uniquely suited to remove, if you will, or help or facilitate the body's removal of certain elements. We know that at the early phase of homeopathic medicine, going back to the 1790s when Dr. Samuel Hahnemann out of Germany developed that system, it continued to evolve and grow around the world and develop innovative, let's call them strategies, much less protocols for undoing damage from traditional vaccines, right? They called the adverse event to vaccines vaccinosis. Right? So we would take the actual vaccine material itself and we can convert it into a homeopathic form for reintroduction safely. But there are also remedies like thuja and silicea, and even one I covered because on my show, I do a show 7 days a week, starting at 3:00 Eastern time every day, Monday through Friday, and pre-record my Saturday and Sunday shows. But I do a homeopathic hit, I call it, every day, a new remedy. I've done hundreds already. And one of them just the other day, was mandrolinum. I remember these are all Latin names, but it was basically grease from a horse converted into a homeopathic form. It also had a significant impact on adverse vaccine events. Now, the complicating factor here is that from COVID forward, they're utilizing mRNA, synthetic man-made mRNA, along with lipid nanoparticles, all kinds of weird deliveries to alter DNA protein conformation. That is, making abhorrent toxic proteins so that it would elicit, in their hopes, an antibody response. But there's no off switch to what they're doing to you. So it's a very strange kind of thing that they wrongly call a vaccine. They actually had to alter the definition legally to be able to call mRNA shots vaccines because they're not the same thing as antigen stimulating antibody. So it becomes a little bit or a lot more complicated. We can still utilize those substances from those vaccines, so-called vaccines, convert them into homeopathic form, and I still recommend to do that. And if anybody wants to send an email or come to my website and send a message, I can send you a link to where you can get that. But otherwise, it's a long haul, if you will, no pun intended. When they talk about long haul COVID or long hauler syndrome, it's usually long vaccine now, as they're calling it. But to undo that can take a lot of time. And it does indeed rely upon some of these key minerals getting back in the system. And number one on that list for me is copper.
Huh. Okay, that's very interesting. I really appreciate all of this information. We're approaching that 30-minute mark. So I wanted to ask you, first of all, where can people find you? How can they learn more? How can they support you? And then also, is there any other final topic you'd like to cover real quick?
All right. Well, you can come to my website, robertscottbell.com. It's just my name. Or you can see our Substack, The RSB Show, RSB for my initials. And that's that Substack. Also, if you do the Instagram thing, it's Ask RSB. Also X, it's Ask RSB, my initials. But we do a show on Rumble because we've been banned so many times on so many platforms, including YouTube. We just gave up on them and said, Rumble doesn't, at this point, has not censored us. So the Rumble channel is Ask RSB as well. So come and join me every day on that show. Now, as far as other topics, good Lord, there are so many. How we can constrain ourselves to a 30-minute little interview, you're just going to whet their appetite and they're going to get mad at you. Like, how come you didn't go an hour or two? Not like we have anything else to do. So tune into my show. But other topics, I think the idea of this interview is really good. And I talk about bringing the power to heal back where it belongs with each and every one of you. We've been so disempowered. We've been programmed to believe we're victims of our genes or just bad luck, or we have to use these experts that know little or nothing about actual healing, just triaging, which they're good at, and I give them credit for that. So I would say, do your diligence as far as, if it doesn't make sense, it doesn't make sense. Common sense is one of those things that seems to be lacking. Like, why would I take a toxic poison to correct an ailment, illness, or syndrome that results from toxic poisons or deficiencies of minerals that are no longer in the food, or very little of them are in the food because of the wasteland that is the soil when you add synthetic poisons, toxic chemicals from the oil industry, or the herbicides, pesticides, fungicides, the glyphosate that robs the soil of the minerals that basically are not there for the plants that grow in the soil and the animals who eat the plants. If you eat the animals or if you eat the plants, you're not getting what you think you're supposed to be getting. So that becomes a need for supplementation. If you want to come to robertscottbell.com, I have an RSB approved section where you can go, all right, here's the stuff this guy has been doing for 32 plus years that I recommend and use. You can check it out. put it to the test. Try. Ask me a question. Join my Patreon community. We do Zoom meetings once a month and ask questions. I have a lot of great people that come on and help one another. So those are some of the things to consider moving forward so that we can get back on the road to real freedom, where we're no longer enslaved to an elite medical class of morons who think they can poison us back to health.
Absolutely. And I think what you touched on there too is the self-accountability thing. I think everything in our life we have a stake in, and so many people have agreed with this thing that things are out of their control. So really, liberty comes down to your own self-responsibility. And maybe people feel like that's a concern at first, where it says, they're like, oh, how do I do this? How do I accept so much self-responsibility? But really, by doing that, you accept a great amount of good power into your life. You're not surrendering everything over to people who are trying to actively poison you, really. So absolutely follow Robert's stuff. He does a great job. Thank you very much for being on the show. I really appreciated it.
Well, I appreciate you, and I'm so glad you're friends with my kids. And this mission for those next generations, which include you, really it relies on, I believe, mentors, those that have been here a little longer, that have not screwed it up so badly, or if they have, they found a way to remedy it so we can share the information. And if you want to do 60 burpees when you turn 60 in 3.5 minutes or less, check out that Cardio Miracle stuff as well. That stuff's amazing, man. Blood flow, oxygenation. I'm doing things I couldn't do at 30, much less at 24. So you guys can do so much better. And I'm so grateful to you and your dad for all the work you're doing. I can't wait to get you back on my show.
Awesome. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed that interview as much as I did. If you want to see another interview, click on that box or a link in the description. And also, if you don't mind, I'd really appreciate it if you'd like,